So in this lecture we'll discuss the spec for the Layout Lab, and we'll do a walkthrough of a working version of the program so you can see what it's supposed to look like. Your job in this lab is to create LayoutLab.css and LayoutLab.html files that provide behavior like that illustrated here in our demo, subject to the length constraints given below. So here it is running in Chrome, and we have an example page here with three major areas. First, there's a header line up here with a text label and a couple of buttons. Button 1, button 2 over here. And points to check off, things you should be sure yours does. First, there's a light bluish background there. And then notice that the header neither expands nor contracts vertically as we run the size of the window up and down. Okay. And the buttons are right justified. And they're just tall enough for their text and no taller than that. And the buttons overlap the text label when we squeeze the layout horizontally. Right? They overlap that text label, and they might go one on top of another. That's okay. The text label does not break into two lines, however, even under contraction. Again, it stays on one line. And the second major part is a middle section here of rows of images. And there are several variants of the down arrow from our earlier expander lab, just as fillers here. But design this, of course, so that any set of images would work, as would more than 3 rows. Each row has a textual row label at the top left of the row, like row 1 here, and then a series of images, and then the points to check off here. First, the images stay next to the row labels. Expanding does not result in a gap between the row label and the first image. And then the first row label stays just underneath the header, even when layout is vertically stretched. Likewise, last row images stick to just above the footer block, regardless of how stretching occurs. And the images never change size. All excess vertical space in the layout goes between the rows of images. Vertical narrowing results in the image rows alone being Y-scrolled, with all images still viewable by scrolling. Horizontal narrowing results in the images alone being X-scrolled, but not the row labels, which always remain visible. And each row of images is scrolled only if necessary, regardless of the other's scroll status. Here the top row is being scrolled because it's too wide. The others would be scrolled only when they reach the point of being too wide, in turn. And then finally, there's a footer section comprising one column of radio buttons down here, and then a fixed width block of lorem text. Check that the text remains right justified and of the same width as layout narrows or widens, and that neither the text nor the radio buttons overlap each other when the layout is very narrow, but instead a scroll bar applicable only to the entire footer appears. Now, a few more details on the project. A couple of hints first. You probably need several nested levels of flex containers to meet all the requirements above. And be sure to look up non-breaking spaces if you're not already familiar with this HTML concept. That'll help with some of the text requirements. And then there are 2 important restrictions. First, your CSS file may be at most 60 lines long. That's not counting blanks and lines with only a curly brace, but put only one style property per line. You don't need more complexity than that. And then second, your layout must work on all 3 major browsers, either IE or Safari, and then Chrome and Firefox, at least the most recent version of each. Don't worry about older versions. The submission process: submit your code by emailing, uncompressed, your LayoutLab.css and LayoutLab.html files to the course grader. And along with these, mail a statement that you have directly verified each of the bullet points above on Chrome, Firefox, and a third browser.